Good afternoon, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to talk about how I know that narcissism is more than just a mental disorder. You know, this is the thing that continues to get discussed all the time. Humanity always wants to create different ways to explain things away that essentially end up taking God out of the equation, or taking spiritual forces out of the equation, or finding some very purely scientific explanation. It's called scientism. It's called other terms as well. But basically, it's that every single thing has a naturalistic understanding and explanation. Well, we've done the same thing here with narcissism and other so-called mental disorders. Because what they want to tell you is this person has some sort of a brain impairment, or they have a problem with development as a child, or they have a particular set of issues that they have to go through because of their childhood trauma. And I'm not discounting the existence of these things. The brain impairment, I think, is a much farther stretch, especially for narcissism. But I'm not going to deny that oftentimes trauma existed in the life of the narcissist as a child. But what I'm going to tell you is, so what? Because a whole lot of people go through childhood trauma and they don't turn out to be narcissists. A whole lot of other people live in good homes and have a relatively good upbringing, and they do turn out to be toxic people or even narcissists. So there's no formula. It's not like childhood trauma equals narcissism. It just doesn't work that way. Why? Because people still have to make decisions. The narcissist chooses to do what they do. But here's the thing. The reason why I know, and there are multiple, I've made other videos, but this one is a huge one. The reason I know that narcissism is more than a mental disorder is because the narcissist is in control of what they do. You know, sometimes we think that these people are just out of control, that they just act totally willy-nilly, and don't get me wrong, sometimes they do. They don't have forethought, they don't make good decisions, they can act on a whim. Those things are true of the narcissist. But generally speaking, they actually have far more control over the way they behave than we ever give them credit for. They actually have, and most of the time, an extreme level of precision on the control they have over the things they do. Let's just run through a few of these. So, you know, whenever they stop the love bomb or the euphoric stage, where they've just piled all this adoration and praise, and they've mirrored back at you all the things that you want to see, and they've just basically completely pretended, like a con artist, to be someone wholly different than they are. Well, when that comes to a stop, a close, usually after they know they have you, you've gotten married, or you've gotten engaged, or you're pregnant together, or you moved in, or you told them you loved them, or some combination of those things. And this is in a romantic sense, but it can also be in other senses, friendship, business relationships. Whenever they know they have you, that is when they're going to start exposing the person behind the mask, their deep, dark, disgusting interior. Well, the fact that they do this as a routine, as a pattern, over and over throughout the course of their lives, the fact that they can fake it however long they need to until they get what they want, that tells you something, doesn't it? It tells you that they have control over it. When you are presenting a mask to someone for, let's just say, just go on the average, that most of us tend to agree the narcissist goes for about 2 to 3 months, and sometimes maybe as long as 6 months, maybe even a little longer if they have a particular thing in sight that they're trying to get. But let's say they keep the mask up for 3 months. They love bomb you and they portray a completely fictitious character. 3 months, 12 weeks. It's not very long actually when you think about it. But The fact that they were able to do that for even 3 months of time, and then, boom, stop. Abruptly just drop it. That tells you that they have control over it. That tells you that they know exactly what they are doing. A lot of people don't think the narcissist knows what they're doing. Absolutely they do. They actually know what they're doing the whole time, for the most part. They know when they have you and they're going to drop the act and start to abuse you and enter the devaluation stage. They know when they have placed you in the trauma bond. They have full awareness of that because they know from experience, from doing it over and over and over, when someone has reached a point where they are in that really vulnerable situation now where they can't tell up from down, they can't make heads or tails of things, and the narcissist has got you in that wishy-washy pattern. They know when you're in that fog and you're in that bad place. They know it, and they intend to put you there. But the very fact that they can keep the mask up for about 3 months, and then when they know that you're bought in, you're entangled, boom, they drop it. Maybe 5 days after you said you loved each other, the mask dropped. Maybe it was on your wedding night. Thankfully, I didn't marry the narcissist. If you did, my heart absolutely goes out to you because that makes things way more difficult. If you had children with them, my heart really goes out to you because you can't simply walk away at that point. That's rough. Drop comments below if this stuff applies to you. But the fact that they go for 3 months, they drop it, this is one of those things that you just can't get around. There's no way you can explain that away by mental illness, a brain impairment. How about other things? This is the biggest one. The fact that they can pretend to perfect strangers on a regular basis, day in, day out, that they are a different person, that they are someone that they're not, that speaks volumes. You know how intentional and thought out that is? Do you know what it takes actually to get up every morning, to probably text your past supplies and present supplies and reach out to people and present somebody to the people you're texting or on dating apps or whatever, then get dressed, then probably go to work and walk in and present a completely fictitious person to those people at work, because oftentimes those that they work with think they're wonderful. Grand, great, wonderful. It's laughy, it's smiles and jokes, and that's how it is for the narcissist many times. To be able to do that and put that mask on all day at work and then come home later and close the door to the home and start abusing the people that you live with, that takes a lot of intentionality. Not a little bit. That is extremely precise behavior, actually. That is the farthest thing from out of control behavior. That's the farthest thing from involuntary actions or something that what a mental disorder would cause. You see, here's the problem. Mental disorders do not cause someone to act with extreme intentionality. They do just the opposite, don't they? People who actually have genuine mental disorders, which maybe you know some, I know some, they behave in very random, sporadic ways oftentimes. They exhibit behaviors that are not thought out, that are not intentional, that really are just sort of spur of the moment actions, triggers. They do repetitions of things that are just clockwork. It's very, very, very robotic, oftentimes, for people with mental impairments. And you know another thing that people with mental impairments don't tend to do is go out of their way to abuse people. You can tell the difference between someone who struggles with a mental illness or mental disorder and someone who is being cruel. It's a totally different ballgame. So these are not things that you can just simply say are mental disorders. I don't know how people. That is the term. Those are the terms, and even stuff like bipolarism, personality disorder, borderline personality disorders, malignant personality disorders, malignant narcissism. We have sociopaths, psychopaths, all sorts of different things. But what we're explaining, we're trying to do there, or people are trying to do, is explain away um, evil behaviors as something that is scientifically and naturalistically occurring, or naturalistically occurring and scientifically explainable. Because if you attach those labels onto them, then you take away all of that eerie, spiritual stuff, and it becomes totally explainable by natural causes. Scientism. Does anything that I'm describing really sound like a mental disorder? It doesn't. There's too much intentionality involved. You cannot pretend to be one person for months on end and then drop it immediately and be a completely different person. And then, more importantly, I forgot this part, they come back whenever they need to. They literally turn it on and off like a switch. When you start to pull away, or they know that you're starting to figure them out, or they really need something from you, they put that mask right back on. And you get a little bit of that, you get a breadcrumb of hope. You get a little bit of that person that showed up in the first few months. That's by accident? What did their brain disorder just go, trick, poof, time to put the mask back on? No, they did it because they know they needed to do it, because you were pulling away. That is intentional. It's intentionality, if ever there was such a thing. Again, go back to the work example. They've convinced most people at work that they are angels. They're helpful. They're cheery. They want to tell you all about the weekend that they had, how wonderful of a parent they were, and they went and did this, that, and the other thing with their family, and this was a great trip, and this happened, that happened, and you would really think the narcissist is living a great life. A lot of us have a hard time wrapping our minds around this after the discard, or the reverse discard, because we're thinking, this person really seems like they rode off into the sunset and they're doing it right now. They seem that way. But we know better. That is an act. That is the mask. That's what was presented to you when you met the narcissist. So they do this regularly at work. They do this in communities, in clubs. Their neighbors oftentimes think they're wonderful people. They'll go cut down a tree if the neighbor needs help. They'll go help them with a car repair. They'll go take them maybe to the hospital if they're sick. They'll do all sorts of these things. That's to keep up appearances, because the narcissist needs most of the world to think that they're wonderful. Remember, the narcissist is always doing what their evil master Satan does. They masquerade as an angel of light, or they masquerade as servants of righteousness. That's what we're told Satan does, and that his servants do the same thing. So the narcissist needs, in fact, their game is predicated on convincing most people that they are good and they're wonderful. That's how they ensnared us, right? That's how they did it. We know the reality is behind that, it's disgusting, it's filthy. So when I say that narcissism is, I know narcissism is more than a mental disorder, this is proof. Because there's too much intentionality in it. Mental disorders do not cause people to willingly, knowingly, intentionally act in cruel and malicious ways, and to do it consistently. Well, and to consistently trick everyone around them. The fact that you can go to one person you're talking to and be cheery and kind and seem to be good-hearted and attentive, patient, and then you can later go that same day to somebody probably behind closed doors that you're living with or that you're close to and berate them and bludgeon them with abuse and be cruel and vicious. That tells you it is controllable. Does it not? What other explanation is there? Is that really a brain impairment? Is that really a mental disorder? And can you really say, well, the trauma did it? The childhood trauma. Blame the trauma. The trauma made you willingly choose to be different people depending on the situation? It made you, it took away your accountability, it took away your choice? Well, it didn't, because the choice is clearly there, because they can put the mask on and take it off whenever they need to do it. That, folks, has nothing to do. You can take the trauma out of it. You can take the mental disorder part of it out. You can take everything else out of it, because we know they intend to do what they do. And they prove it every day. And they proved it with us. And they proved it not just in the euphoric stage and then the huge transition to the devaluation stage, but they proved it every time they were nasty and cruel and then came back and breadcrumbed, and nasty and cruel and then came back and breadcrumbed. This wasn't their brain just firing and triggering. They chose to do these things, just as they choose the path of darkness. That's how the narcissist becomes a narcissist. They willingly chose, little by little, bit by bit, manipulation by manipulation, time and time again, over the course of time, they gave themselves over to the powers of darkness by choosing to be dark. That's not a mental disorder. People with mental disorders don't sit back and contemplate what they're going to do to someone. They don't sit back and say, I think I'll go and pretend to be really kind to the public, and then I'll come back home and I'll throw somebody through a wall. Or I'll bludgeon them with verbal abuse. That's not how that works. So, what is the answer? What's the solution? Well, you know what I'm going to say. Narcissism is chiefly a spiritual disorder. These people are evil. If you cannot call their behaviors gaslighting, cheating, lying, stealing, physical and mental abuse, if you can't call these types of things evil, then there's no such thing as evil. There's no good or evil, matter of fact. If those things are not evil, there's no such thing as evil. So yeah, this is a spiritual problem. It's a spiritual disorder. These people are in league with their master, the devil. They gave themselves over. And I know that it's on a spectrum. And I'm not saying that there aren't worse narcissists and greater, lesser and greater, and people all along that path. There are. But every bit of that, the more narcissistic you are, the more evil you are. It's not simply a mental disorder. We've got to stop explaining things away. Now, does it manifest mentally? Well, of course. You can't separate it entirely. But what is the root cause? They're spiritually corrupt. And therefore, what they do and what they think and how they process things is mentally corrupt. That's a mental disorder that is spawned from a spiritual disorder. That's what it is. So that's the root cause. They're corrupt. They're evil. 2 Timothy 3, 1-5. Go read it. Paul describes them to perfection. So anyway, guys, this is how I know that narcissism is more than a mental disorder. Because it's intentional. It's controlled. They have a great deal of control over everything, actually, that they do. And if you have a lot of control and intentionality in what you're doing, that's not a mental disorder. That's not something you just can't help. No, that's something you willingly choose to do. And that's why narcissism is a spiritual disorder and not a mental disorder. Or I should better say that narcissism is chiefly at its core a spiritual disorder that then manifests itself mentally and in other ways. So I hope this makes sense to you, but don't cut them slack on this. They know what they're doing, and the very fact that they choose to have control, they have control and they choose to do things, clearly tells you that they're corrupt. You're dealing with a satanic person. You're dealing with a spiritually corrupt person when you deal with the narcissist. Run for the hills from these people. They don't change. They only get worse. They're out for abuse. They're out to take you down. And that's precisely what their mission is once they're given over to the powers of darkness. Hope this is helpful for somebody. I appreciate the new subscribers. We've gotten numerous here recently. And I'm going to start doing some more shorts, I think. Then if you guys like those, let me know. But I'll start doing some more shorts. They seem to get better views. And also I think they're a little more effective sometimes when I don't have as much time or there's just a specific thing I want to say. So anyway, thanks again for watching. I will come at you with some more videos this week. Until then, God bless.